Hi friends, I will put up text here from Romans 10, edition 0.5.2.3 of the Good News of Messiah ebook. If you already have the ebook, check to see if it is version 0.5.2.3 on the title page. Send me an email to daniel@torahtimes.org and I will send you an updated version at no charge if you don't have it. I recently sent everyone a link for this, but you may have missed it. I expect paper book versions to catch up shortly, though due to COVID-19 slowness in the business system, it may take a few weeks. If anyone has an outdated book version of edition 4 or 5, send me an email and I will send you the updated ebook to go with it, even if you have never gotten the ebook version. If you are new to this, the ebook may be purchased at worldwideweb.torahtimes.org. Also, you can get the whole book of John in an ebook format for free at the top of the order page. This text is from Romans 10. Let's read through this. You shall not have said in your heart, who will ascend into heaven? This is to bring the Anointed One down. Or who will descend into the abyss? This is to bring the Anointed One up from the dead. But what is it saying? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. This is the word of the faithfulness which we are proclaiming, that if you may have confessed with your mouth, Adonai Yeshua, and may have pledged faithfulness in your heart, because the Almighty raised him from the dead, you will be rescued. Because by the heart one is confirmed faithful to righteousness, and by the mouth one confesses oneself unto deliverance. Notice how different this is from your regular version. This is because the church long ago abandoned sound scholarship when it rejected the law of the Almighty, just like the house of Israel abandoned the law under its first king Jeroboam, and then all her kings afterward. Like the kings of old, the church has embraced false doctrine for many generations, and they have put this false doctrine into their translations, just as some false doctrines were added to the Samaritan Pentateuch and the Old Greek Septuagint. So we should not underestimate either the length of time or the degree to which error can persist. Christians are willing to recognize that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, but somehow are under the impression that things go only in a positive direction for the church, or that tradition should never be subjected to reconsideration. Messiah said that in the end of days many would apostatize from the truth, even from within the Messianic faith. In one sense, the last 2,000 years is the end of the age, because it is the last one-third of history. Earlier followers of Messiah did think it was the last days after he came. So I will suggest that apostasy and translational corruption has been happening most of the time to some extent, and for the last 500 years to an extreme extent, while many Messianic teachers are able to recognize or suspect that the Bible translation they use is corrupt at some points. They know that most of their audience will turn them off if they were to attempt to make the corrections. What these teachers fail to note is that some error left uncorrected keeps other errors from being detected, and so they never come to realize the full extent of the error that has crept in. They are teaching what they have discovered while recovering from the false teaching of their background. While this must be, and I do not want to discourage it, I don't want to discourage anyone from sharing the new things they have discovered. It is by no means ideal to do this when one is still recovering from a false tradition. But we should certainly not halt the progress at the door of a translation made in ignorance of Messiah's Torah. Nor should we be content with messianic translations that patch a gaping wound with a little bandage and say it is all right when a transfusion is needed. We need the humility to keep improving things and not stop at the barrier of traditional translations just because we think people might turn us off. This is why I keep updating the ebook and the print translation. The latest update is nothing major in the translations. As mentioned a few videos back, the notes concerning the atonement have been repaired and improved, in the main down the lines of the ransom and moral government explanations. I should also point out that a tradition of misinterpretation usually goes before mistranslation, and that a little bit of mistranslation most often yields a great deal of misinterpretation. Okay, let's focus on the text at hand. Zero in on the small capital sentence in Romans 10:8. The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. The little Greek rho at the end of the quote is a footnote reference to Deuteronomy 30:14, and that is where this quotation is taken from. Has anyone ever read Deuteronomy 30:14 and the surrounding context? Paul says immediately in the second half of verse 8 that this is the word of faithfulness which we are proclaiming. Only the regular version will have faith, and no one will bother to look up Deuteronomy 30:14 or its context to see what the word is. Instead, they will go back to Martin Luther and John Calvin to determine the meaning that faith is correct based on tradition, but faithfulness is in the translator's lexicon. This is the word. For this commandment which I am commanding you today is not too wonderful beyond you, and it is not far off. It is not in the heavens that you should say, who will ascend for us into the heavens, that he may take it to us, that we may hear it, and we may do it. And it is not after a crossing of the sea that one must say, who will cross over the sea for us and receive it for us, that we may hear it, and we may do it. But the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. He says, this is the word of faithfulness which we are proclaiming. Paul is citing a text that speaks of obeying the commandments of the Almighty. In fact, the whole chapter in Deuteronomy 30 is about obeying the commandments in the end of days. The Greek in Romans 10:8 says, but what is it saying? Or I could have put, what does it say? The verb legi is conjugated in the third person singular. Paul is referring to the scripture here. He is not simply inventing the phrase. We are required to interpret the quotation according to the Torah. The alternative is to say that Paul was taking the passage out of context and that he was twisting the meaning around by reducing faithfulness to mere faith, belief, or trust, which we have been told is a predestined gift by Luther and Calvin. But such a reduction does not agree with the definition of the word given to Israel on the plains of Moab. It does not agree with what the word says in the last book of the Torah. The word is to obey the commandments, to choose life and not death. So you see, the mystery of iniquity must have been hard at work, shifting the bounds, changing the definitions, deceiving humanity, that Christianity as we know it is something that Paul invented. Clearly, the original message was so persuasive that instead of simply ignoring it, Satan had to appoint his own apostles to redefine it, his Gnostics, the popes, and the reformers. If you stand amazed at the speed with which the Constitution of the United States is getting redefined by the left, then I suggest that modern Christianity is the result of the same process over a much longer period of time. So, what is Paul's point in verse 6b? Besides making the point that the law is not mysterious and up in heaven, his point doubles as who is good enough to get into heaven. That is, who has enough merit to go there. This is the Jewish doctrine of zechut I've been talking about. Zechut is anti-forgiveness. But Messiah's ransom teaches that death illegally holds us after forgiveness. so merit is unnecessary. Therefore, Messiah ransoms us from death. No merit is needed at all. No birthright or tapping into birthright is needed by either baptism or circumcision to inherit merit. Such doctrine brings Messiah down from the place where he ransomed us. Who will go to the bottom of the sea to get the law? This is Paul's paraphrase of who will cross the sea to get it. But Paul has another purpose here. Who has so much demerit that it cannot be forgiven, that he must perish? This also is to say that Messiah did not die as a ransom and get buried. It is Messiah who rescues us, purchasing us from the hands of death. We can pledge faithfulness because the Almighty raised him from the dead. The Father reversed the injustice done to his only kindred Son. By doing so, he officially declares our penalty invalid when he forgives us. He ransoms us from death's attempt to execute the penalty on us, and then he rescues his ransom from the grave also. The enemy is defeated. The enemy is shown no pity. Its strict justice made illegal by the forgiving justice of the Father. The text also says, because by the heart one is confirmed faithful to righteousness. Or I could have put, by the heart one is held faithful to righteousness. I want you to notice that all the versions failed to translate the passive voice in the Greek here, or even the middle voice. Why is this? Because the false versions want to make it mean believe, and following the accurate Greek text would yield, for by the heart one is believed to righteousness. Or, for by the heart one believes oneself unto righteousness. And neither make any sense. But, because by the heart one is confirmed faithful to righteousness, makes good sense, or is held faithful to righteousness. The heart confirms or disconfirms the sincerity of a pledge of faithfulness to Messiah, to obey him and pursue righteousness. What do the versions and the theologians want to get out of the word righteousness in verse 10? They want to get the merits of Christ imputed to their accounts. That's what they want to get out of it. But plainly, it means that by a truly repentant heart, one is going to be held faithful to being righteous, to obeying the commandments. I will briefly mention some technical details of the good news of Messiah. Verse 6b. You shall not have said is a subjunctive perfect in English, corresponding to an aorist subjunctive in Greek. If you may have confessed and may have pledged faithfulness are likewise subjunctive perfects, for the same reason. Also notice that it says, because the Almighty raised him from the dead, and not that the Almighty raised him from the dead. This is because the resurrection is not simply a datum to be believed. Rather, it is the reason we can pledge faithfulness to Messiah with the hope of deliverance. So the word because is correct versus that which suggests mere intellectual faith in the resurrection. If you look up the underlying word oti, you will see that because is a common definition. Since the paperback version went on Amazon, the only difference is in verse 9, where it says, may have pledged faithfulness. The previous update said, may have confirmed your faithfulness. The sense is the same. I have kept confirmed faithfulness when the phrase is followed by to in Greek. That is, confirming faithfulness to him in John 3:16. Pistis in Greek is the keeping of a pledge of loyalty, i.e. faithfulness. Okay, let's check to see what the commentators do to evade the plain meaning of the context when it says, this is the word of faithfulness which we are proclaiming. Albert Barnes says in his commentary, quote, that is, this is the use which the apostle makes of it, not that Moses referred to the gospel, unquote. Let me see if I've got this right. Paul is using a text to illustrate his point that directly contradicts what Barnes thinks his point is. And Barnes thinks this even though faithfulness and fidelity are in the translator's dictionaries in the first definitions, and choosing these senses would agree exactly with what is said in Deuteronomy 30. The expositor's Greek Testament says, quote, in Deuteronomy, the word is, of course, the Mosaic law. Here it is the gospel, the word which deals with that pistis on which the righteousness of God depends. The whole idea of the verses is that righteousness has not to be achieved, but only appropriated. Unquote. Paul's quotation from the law ends like this, that you may do it. This commentary wants the act of believing to channel the merits of Christ into the sinner's legal account, erasing the demerits. That's what the expositors means by appropriated versus achieved, i.e., to be regarded as righteous without doing righteousness. Once again, this kind of reasoning is pure legalism, actually legal fiction. When Yahweh showed his back to Moses, he proclaimed his name, that he forgives iniquity and sin, and that he engages in no legalisms to acquit the guilty. In verse 10, the commentaries interpret the word righteousness to mean justification. That is, quote, for in the heart one believes to justification, unquote. But as I noted before, the verb is passive here and means one is believed or one believes oneself, which is abject nonsense. But by the heart one is confirmed faithful to righteousness makes good sense. They say justification is being considered righteous without being righteous, or being infused with righteousness without an evidence of outward righteousness. Once again, this is legalism. The Father cares about forgiveness and real righteousness in his little faithful ones. Just to be thorough, I will mention other parts of the Good News of Messiah translation in this text. Note the words anointed for Christ, Adonai for Lord, Yeshua for Jesus, Almighty for God, rescued for saved, and deliverance for salvation. The latter two are new in the update also, that is, rescue and deliverance. The reason for avoiding church words is that the church has redefined the meanings, avoided Hebrew influence, and joined an anti-Torah culture to their use. Because the church has gone the way of the world and joined its terms to the culture, and above all because its terms are technically inaccurate and theologically corrupted, I have righted things so that a distinction can again be made between the sons of Yisrael and the world. Thank you for listening.